there was a time when nobody would even touch mental health, talking about mental health. It was very quiet. As you said, there was a stigma, and we have to admit there is still a stigma attached.
Sure.
But we've come a mighty long way. Forward to all of you joining me every month as we grab our cups and have a coffee break with the mayor. Well, it's time for a coffee break with the mayor. Hello everyone, I'm Mayor Sharon Weston Broome, and we're starting a new initiative. It's a podcast, and it's going to be a coffee break with the mayor. So for the next 20 minutes, I want you to tune in, get your cup of coffee, and we're going to have a conversation with some very, very interesting guests. We'll have guests from all walks of life. Most of them will be from right here in the Red Stick. And so today's focus is going to be on mental health. A statistic I want to share with you. Are you aware that 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with a mental illness? Actually, it's more than 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with a mental illness. Here's another stat. In Louisiana, 720 lives were lost to suicide, and 159,000 adults had thoughts of suicide in the last year. I'm going to give you one more statistic, and then we're going to talk about this. 44,000 Louisianians age 12 through 17 have depression. So the truth is, without sharing those statistics with you surrounding mental health, most of the conversations that I am involved in as the mayor, with other mayors, with other individuals representing nonprofit organizations, one of the top issues that we often talk about is mental health. And so I would not have a conversation about mental health without talking with my friend, someone that I've known for decades, who is on the front lines of addressing mental health in our community. And she's not a stranger to you. Her name is Tonja Myles. Well, hello, Tonja.
Thanks for the coffee,
You got
Mayor.
coffee?
Yes,
look at yours.
good
Yours
coffee.
matches your outfit, and mine matches mine.
Congratulations. First of many.
Thank you. And listen, you know this about me. What do you know about me when it comes to cups?
I have a million trillion.
I have a million trillion cups. That's true. I collect cups and mugs, and so most of them have messages on
Yes.
it. Yours says kindness.
Yes.
Mine says sing a new song to the Lord. So Tonja, I shared that most people who know anything about mental health in Baton Rouge have seen you at some point in time. Why are you so passionate? Why are you so committed? I mean, you go out in the neighborhoods, you go to the hard places, you help people in recovery, you intervene. So what drives you? Where does this passion come from?
So that passion comes from, I am one of the 5 who live well with a mental health diagnosis. And I just thought it was so interesting that you pointed those stats out, because a lot of times people think it's not that common, but it is. There are so many people in our community who are suffering in silence, and that's why I use my lived experience to talk about, my challenges, the things that I have to go through on the real, and so just to push hope out there to folks and resources, and again, to address the stigma, because again, it's a conversation we don't want to have. When we think about mental health or mental illness, we think that person is crazy or something like that, but that person has a brain pain, or it could be a chemical imbalance, it could be trauma. It's so many reasons why people have a diagnosis of mental health issues, but at the end of the day, we have to have these conversations. And I'm so grateful that you always have this conversation. And look, you said it, not me. We've been knowing each other for a long time. So you have seen my challenges and my triumphs.
Yeah, but you said something that we have to address, and that is, I have seen the stigma
Yeah.
somewhat diminish over the years. I mean, because there was a time when nobody would even touch mental health, talking about mental health. It was very quiet.
Right.
As you said, there was a stigma, and we have to admit there is still a stigma attached.
Sure.
But we've come a mighty long way.
Oh yeah, we absolutely have. I mean, I was just thinking the other day. I was watching a movie on one of the streaming channels, and it was Queen Charlotte. Everybody's watching it, and I had no idea that it would turn to that her husband ended up having a mental health diagnosis. But the thing about that is that how they treated it back then. And so that was another thing that just really messed with stigma. But also, when it comes to people thinking, well, I might have to have medication, or might have to go see a psychiatrist, or if I have to see someone for help, that means I'm crazy. Again, it's that word. And so when we have conversations, and when you see regular people, who live just like you and I, say, well, I have a diagnosis, or I struggle with some kind of mental health issue, I think what it does, it makes it normal. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we address, the trauma that comes from that, the trust and the traditions, because that's why people don't do it. I mean, back in the day, where I come from, you don't tell people your business, you keep it under the blood or under the rug. But, I understand the prayer and the encouragement behind that. But at the end of the day, if someone was having issues with their high blood pressure, we would encourage them to go to a doctor. So why not, if someone having issues with depression or anxiety or brain pain, that I like to call it, why not go see a healthcare provider?
Oh, absolutely. We're quick to tell people you need to get yourself checked out when it's dealing with our physical being.
Right.
But just like you said, and actually, the truth is, our physical and mental well-being go hand in hand. You can't really separate them. I want to talk about something. When I shared that we've been friends for a gazillion years, and I never thought about you as someone with a mental health diagnosis until you kind of shared it with me, and shared some of your experiences. And even then, I have never thought anything other than this is just my amazing friend Tonja Myles. But I tell you, I have learned so much from you in this space. But I've also, I think that there may be people who are missing out on some significant relationships because they don't know how to
Have the conversation.
have the conversation.
You know what? And since you brought it up, and we running an honest program on this podcast, Mayor, you're absolutely right. I mean, and I appreciate that about you, but I also know that a lot of times I tried to hide it because of the stigma, or I just didn't want you to really see how bad it was, because it will probably had scared you. And so, a lot of times I would go ghost,
Yeah, you've done that with me.
You
did that with me one time, and it really bugged me. But then, and that's when I understood what was going on, because I was really pretty mad with you about that. I was like, Tonja didn't show up. She was supposed to show up for something. She didn't show up. And then like you said, I didn't know the term is ghost, but then you said you went ghost. And then later on, I understood it. And talk about that, but talk about set free indeed. And I think that was a real breakthrough as well for me understanding.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, look, at the end of the day, a lot of times it scares me. Look, when your brain does stuff that you cannot control, it's scary for the individual. So let me just be real clear about that. People who have a mental health diagnosis, it's a challenge to us because it's still a whole lot of research that's not being done. And so when we have to change the medications because one medication don't work, and then there's a side effect from this, that, and it's scary for us. And so when we feel ourselves, when I feel myself having anxiety, it's scary for me. So trying to vocalize that, to friends, has been a challenge. And until one day we really had a candid conversation, and I thought it was something else that I made you mad about. So that was like, oh, I thought it was the last thing from 7 years ago. But but again, that's why go back to what you said about my passion, because I want people to talk about it. I really want people to have conversations, and when we ask a person, how are you doing, to lean in and listen, and to be ready to hear what they have to say, and sometimes sit in it. And so with the ministry we started, Set Free Indeed, which is from John 8:36, whom the Son is set free is free indeed. We only not just address mental health, but addiction as well. But there are so many people, like I told you, that are suffering in silence. And the more conversations we have about this, and look, even encouraging people how to have that conversation. When you see a family member or a friend struggling, how to lean in more, and just because I used to say, I'm good, and then I'd hang up the phone and be balled up on the floor somewhere. So I think that when we let people know about the resources there are, and let people know that there is hope, and that you are not the only one. Correct. I think we can really see more of candid conversations between friends, between any relationship that you're in, when you see someone who might be having a mental health diagnosis or struggling with it. Because look, just because you have a diagnosis, that don't mean you're struggling.
Right. And two things it prompted when you said that. One is kind of unpack the mental health diagnosis, your mental health diagnosis. I don't have to know every detail, but what prompted it? What were the triggers? I know I don't know if that's the correct language to use, but we have been talking about adverse childhood experiences. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, the ACE.
ACE.
And that's huge.
And that plays a role that sometimes doesn't manifest until later on in life. So just tell us briefly about that, because I have so many things I want to talk to you about during our coffee break.
Well, back in the day, I used to sing for Dr. Valerian Smith, and he had me sing that song that he wrote, and it went, I am just a child I know, everything I am will grow. Things that hurt when I am small grows much bigger when I'm tall. He had no idea that he was having me to sing, what my life was look like. And that was, the ACEs, the adverse childhood experience. When I was 7, I was molested, and I was this little happy girl who loved to sing and made everybody smile. And one day I became someone totally different. And so when that happened, it caused me to have a lot of challenges that I kept on the inside of me. And now, there's data behind when a child has one of these 10, if there's a question in the air that they take, and if they have had like loss or had a family member that abused them, or someone abused them, or whatever, there's 10 of them. And depending on how many questions they ask, I think I was one, I had 8 of them. And so, but if I would have known then what I knew now, but more than anything, if my parents would have known about ACEs and how to treat their young black girl who had all these hopes and dreams, and now she's this terror, that now people are calling saying you need to come get her from school because she's fighting. And so I act out a lot. And so, we have to ask kids, instead of what the heck is wrong with you, start asking them what happened to them. Because truly, when you see a kid acting out, it could be that something else is going on the inside of them. And so I'm so excited that, even in our community, you have really brought ACEs to the forefront. And now so many organizations are using them who are addressing kids. So, it could become because of childhood trauma. It can be just a medical diagnosis of our brains are different. And some people have a chemical imbalance. Some of it is drug induced, and some of mine was, and so there are many different reasons, but at the end of the day, it's not cookie cutter. But we just need to let people know that there's hope and there's help, and it's okay to reach out. It's okay to go to therapy, because therapy ain't scary. And like I say all the time too, I can have a script and a scripture, which I do every morning, and it works for me.
Therapy, the stigma around therapy has gone out the window now, because everybody I know in America has a therapist.
And I hope they're licensed.
But I do want to tune into what you said about hope. So how do we transition from a mental health diagnosis to hope? How do we transition from substance abuse to hope? how do we, is it wrong to think that we can transition from mental health to a level of normalcy? And I don't even know if that's the right word to use, because normal can be defined a whole lot of ways
Right,
these
and
days.
everybody normal is different.
Yeah.
But it's just like anything else. I mean, we have to really address it. And for me, once the pain had a name, it all made sense, which was PTSD.
Okay.
And so I'm just like, oh, I'm not crazy. This is why, this is why the brain pain. And so when I was properly diagnosed, because for the longest I ran away, I knew something was wrong, but I'm like, the devil is a lie. I am a woman of faith. I mean, I'm doing all this great work. I can't, I can't let people know that I'm depressed. And because and that's another thing, when I would tell people that, they would always go, but you have such a good life, you have a good life, you shouldn't be depressed, the devil is a lie. And that's a spirit. Ooh, that one right there for another day. But and so it's those kind of things that we have to talk about and we have to address, because again, if someone had an issue with blood pressure or diabetes, we wouldn't say that's a spirit on you, or something like that. We would encourage them to get help to lower their numbers. And so for me, and the 1 in 5, sometimes that looks like medication. It looks a whole lot like prayer and meditation. It looks like a whole lot of self-care. So there are things that we can do to live well, just like anybody else who have a heart diagnosis. You got to take care of your heart. Right. So I know I have to take care of my brain. It's the same thing.
Yeah, and I know we're going to have to wrap up. This is a long coffee break we've had here, but talk to me about, in a very short period of time, we probably need to have a part 2 of this conversation, the spectrum of mental health, because you mentioned self-care. Yes. And while people may not have a mental health diagnosis, that doesn't exempt the need to be preventive and take care of your mental health like you do your physical health.
Yes, come on. I mean,
you're the queen of self-care. I confess, and I fall short.
We're working on that.
I fall short when it comes to self-care.
But you do it well. I mean, but here's the deal, because again, our brain is just like any other organ in our body. People go to the gym to work out a whole lot. Well, guess what? You got to integrate that brain in there. I mean, at the end of the day, even when you're working out, it's all about in your mind. When you're trying to go that extra mile or, get those extra weights, it's all about, what's in your brain. And so, I think that we know that, reading and stuff like that is healthy for the brain. We talk about that. That's one of them. But but what some of the things you can do to take a break. Let me just say this. We in America, we think that it's all about the grind, it's all about the hustle, which it is. Or when you hear people say, I'm going to sleep when I die. Ooh, that's kind of, people say that. No, you need to take care of your mental health now. And so just like any other place on your body, you have to take care of your brain. That looks like rest. It looks like self-care. It looks like getting off social media. Yeah. It looks like praying and meditation.
Yeah, well, great. So what do you want the citizens of Baton Rouge to know? If you were to make a closing comment, if you were to give some strong advice or recommendation, what would you say?
I would say that there is hope, that you can live well with having a mental health diagnosis. And we hear all the time, it's okay not to be okay. It is, but you need to reach out for help. And I'm so grateful that here in our community we have so many different resources, and that you can call, or if it might be a loved one who you think that's having some challenges, you can reach out to them. Your first line of defense is 988. It's a national hotline that, even though it's national, it connects you to local resources. I call it a call for help, but connections to hope. Call that number. If you see someone who's struggling, you don't know what to do, call that number. It might be you. Call. They're licensed, they're trained. And look, and just go to, Healthy BR, safehopefulhealthybr.com. There's so many different resources that can help you or a loved one who's struggling. There's hope.
And what a great message. Well, my friend, thank you so much for being my first guest on the podcast. And listen, I have to give a shout out to Mitzi down here, who is Tonja's service dog. And if you know anything about me, I love dogs, and Mitzi loves me. That's my girl right there. So I want to encourage you to join us for our next podcast, where we will have another special guest with some meaningful information. And Tonja, we will have a part 2 of this conversation, because there are so many things that we need to unload around the whole issue of mental health. Thank you for joining us on our first episode. Next time, bring your coffee cup and have a coffee break with the mayor.